I read this in preparation here, sitting on a balcony overlooking the beach. I read 27 on the way back on the airplane. I didn't know which one I was supposed to be on, but I read them both. Try to study them a little bit. We're in Matthew chapter 26. Matthew 26. I'll just read some of this here, kind of go through it. And it came to pass when Jesus had finished all these things, he said unto his disciples, Ye know that after 2 days the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the place of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas. Back to what he's saying here in verse 2. We've studied Matthew throughout the year here, and we've gone through this, and I've been trying to point out, and it amazes me how many times Jesus has to tell his disciples, the apostles, what is going to happen. And it seems like every time he does, then they don't understand, they don't believe. And that gives us grace, God's riches at Christ's expense, grace, and that gives us grace to know that these guys were standing right there with them and they didn't understand all of it. Obviously, it hadn't happened yet, and they weren't able to lay out what was going on, but he has told and retold and told and retold them so many times what's going to happen, and they still are shocked when it happens. And that, for me, that gives me grace to, whenever I'm reading and I don't understand something, those guys were right there with them and they didn't understand it. So obviously it takes some studying and to get better knowledge of the Bible, but that makes me feel a little bit better to see how, for lack of better words, how kind of dumb these guys were. It makes me feel better about not understanding. And verse 4, and consulted that they might take Jesus by uh, subtlety and kill him. Sorry, my spaced out there. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Obviously, this is all happening for a reason, and the days are lined up, and everything's happening for a reason, as been told, as Jesus has told everyone so far. It's not that they don't want to do it on the day of the feast, it's because that's not God's will, and they're trying to say, make it their will. When it wouldn't have mattered if they tried to take him that day or when. If it wasn't the right time, then they wouldn't have been able to do it. Now, when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head, and he sat at meat. You guys watch The Chosen. This is a amazing part right here. I can see it. Obviously, I've seen the show, but just seeing this woman come in and do this, and the what it means, and everything she's done and saved, just to be able to put some ointment on the Son of God. But when the disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, that what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for so much and given to the poor. And the person in charge of the money here is Judas. So we know that Judas is at least one of them saying this, and he's the one in charge of the finances, so it's probably him saying it. I don't know that for a fact, but that's the way I see it. For this ointment might have been sold for so much and given to the poor. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, Why trouble you this woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me you have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. And this is when they wash the lamb before the sacrifice. This is all part of it. When you buy the lamb at the market to take it into sacrifice, it had to be washed with this ointment 2 days prior, I think, maybe 3 days, sorry, before, so that it's accepted for a sacrifice. So this is all part of God's plan, so that whenever we read back on this later, we can start adding these things up and reading in between the lines, and we can see how all this plan came together. Verily I say unto you, whosoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this that this woman hath done be told for a memorial of her. What an awesome blessing she got there to be able to know that in the beginning was the Word was God, and my word will never go away. Well, he's saying here also, his word's not going to go away, but her memorial for her will be in his word at all times. What an awesome reward she got there. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priest and said unto them, What will ye give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. And from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. Again, it doesn't really matter when he's wanting to betray him. The opportunity is not going to present itself until God's ready for his plan to be shown. Now, the first day of the feast of the unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare thee to eat the Passover? And he said unto them, Go into the cities to such a man, and say unto him, The Master saith, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. So you see here, and it may not be recorded in Matthew because maybe he was the one that did it, or maybe it didn't happen at all. Maybe they're learning, but you see before, whenever they told him to go get the donkey, and then they questioned him, and now they're finally understanding that whatever he says we need to do, especially if they're starting to understand that he doesn't have much time left. Now, when the even was come, he sat down with the 12, and as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Lord, is it I? And he answered and said, He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish is the same shall betray me. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him, but woe unto the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. So you can imagine Judas sitting there and knowing that he's the one that did that, but also he's not understanding that Judas could have been. I mean, you can look at this in different ways and you can study this out. Judas could have been the last person to die before salvation. Judas could have been the first person to die after salvation, and you just don't know. It doesn't give us a perfect timeline there, but there's going to be something for him there, because now we're living under grace and not the law. So if Judas could have not done his sacrifice at the right time, and then he's going to not be going to heaven, or Jesus could have died on the cross for our salvation, and then Judas could have been the first one there. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff where you get off track and whatnot, but you can just think of what's going through his mind at this time. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? He said unto him, Thou hast said. And if you underline thou hast said, I think that you can probably make an easy message out of this, because just in this chapter, I believe it's this chapter, we see that again in this chapter where Jesus is saying, Thou hast said. And that is in modern terms to me like, is it I? And you said it. Or, it's not a yes, but it's like, it's you. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And we've studied this quite a bit before, the Lord's, the supper here. I'm going to kind of skip past this. Go to Peter here in verse 31. Then saith Jesus unto them, All ye shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. But after I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. So he's saying that once I'm taken, you guys are leaving. You guys are getting out of Dodge. Peter answered and said unto him, Though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. This is Peter boastful, and he's doing what he thinks is right, and he's making a stand for the Lord. We saw earlier he wanted to make monuments for the Lord, and he's totally doesn't get what he's talking about there. But Jesus said, You all are. That's what he just said. All ye shall be offended of me this night. And here we got Peter again saying, Not me. I'm not the one. Let me walk on the water with you. Well, actually, no, I'm not. Nope. You're wrong, Jesus. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this night before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And Peter said unto him, Though I should die with thee, yet will I not deny thee. Likewise, also said all the disciples. And we see that a little here. We see Matthew writing about this, and I love the way the different disciples write about these things. And we see Matthew really lay it into them, and then right there at the end, almost makes it look smaller. Likewise, said all the disciples. They all said they weren't going to do it. Peter is getting called out here for saying, No, not me, not me. And then right there, likewise, everyone else said they wouldn't do it too. But we have to call out Peter for it. Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and said unto the disciples, Sit ye here while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then saith he unto them, My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry here and watch with me. And I can't figure. I imagine that there's like a big fog in there, and a big, it just looks terrible, like the Spanish moth in the swamps and stuff is what I see and what I've always seen as a kid. And it's just dark, and you can just see shadows. So I cannot feel bad, or I I would have fallen asleep too, is what I'm trying to say. And I feel like that there was something else there with them it's just heavy, and you can just feel the air and whatnot. And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but thou wilt. That's a great verse. Whenever you kind of dissect these verses, if I say that a lot of the times when I'm praying, not as I will, but as thou will, your will, not mine. And I say that a lot of times whenever I'm praying, or I'm asking for something, or going through something. It's like, your will, not mine. And I have to remind myself of that constantly, because he gave us the free will. And he cometh unto the disciples, and findeth them asleep, and said unto Peter, What? Could ye not watch with me an hour? Watch and pray, that ye may enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And it came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them, and went away, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then cometh he to the disciples, and said unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of the sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at the hand that doeth betray me. And for the disciples falling asleep there and whatnot, I don't know what he wanted them to do. He wants them to pray with him, but what does he want them to do that he can't do? I don't know if he's trying to teach them discipline there or whatnot, but again, I mean, if you're on your knees in prayer for something that you desperately want, a family member sick, or marriage to work or whatnot, I'm not staying down there for an hour. There's no way I can do it. So I don't know if Jesus was just trying to teach them to pray again like he had been before, or what he wanted them to pray for, even though he's told them what's going to happen. Does he want them to pray that it doesn't happen? Or does he want them to see that they need to be praying for his will, for God's will be done, not theirs? I'll let you take over from there on 47 or wherever you are.
He might have been showing them their weakness or the weakness of man, so you and I could see the same thing when they went to sleep. And he told them that they ought to be praying. That's what I want you to do. Well, he tells us to go ye therefore in the last verse of the of 28. Go ye therefore and teach all nations. It's us great commission, but yet in a sense we've fallen asleep. And more people in the last days have fallen asleep because of the weakness of man. And that's where it started out in Genesis. And that's one reason why, the main reason why Christ died for us, because we're so weak, we get nothing done. Back to chapter 22, I've preached a few messages on verse 22, and it's something every one of us ought to keep in mind when every one of them asks, Lord, is it I? Am I going to betray you? In your life as a Christian person, if you were like I was, you've done pretty good for a while, a year or 2 years, and then all at once you begin to kind of vanish away from doing what was right. So saying that to say this, we're still that weak person. How much more do we need the Lord? How much more do we need to pray? Lord, is it I? Am I going to be the one that's going to cause a problem in the church? Am I going to be the one that's going to steal from you in one way or the other? And anyway, the message goes on with that particular statement. And again, like Matt said, every one of them said, "Oh, we won't leave you. We won't leave you." Well, we find out later on that every one of them left him, ran away when they come to pick him up. Anyway, I thought I'd touch back on that. But all right, verse 47. And while he yet spake to Judas, one of the 12, came and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he. Hold him fast. You think they could have held him if he didn't want them to? We see that later on when they took him. And forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. I've called that kissing the door of heaven and going to hell. Jesus said he was the door, right? And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Then came they and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And behold, one of them which were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, which that was Peter, as we read later on, and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. Now that's the way Peter was. Just really always kind of jumping out in front, a lot of times jumping to conclusion and saying things he ought not say, and so on. And that's one of the traits of a lot of people today, as I've taught on the gifts of the Spirit and the difference in the people. There's 5 of us here right now, and every one of us have different traits, and everyone has a different type of personality because we're human beings, and the Lord knows that, and so He deals with each one of us according to us individually. And that's another amazing thing about the Bible. When you read it, study it, it brings out our life individually, but it also brings it out as a group, like the church. Where did I leave all that? See what I mean? 52. Then Jesus said unto him, put up again thy sword unto its place, for all that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, as I mentioned a while ago, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? That's 144,000. 12,000 a legion. But how then shall these scriptures be fulfilled, that thus it must be? In that same hour said Jesus to the multitude, have you come out against a thief with swords and staves for to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and ye laid no hold on me. Well, he sat before all those people, and they wanted to lay a hold on him, but there's no way that they could have, because his time hadn't came yet. And he mentions that in other places. But all this was done again, that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Everything's going to work out according to the prophecy of the prophets in the Old Testament, because God's the one that gave them the prophecy. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. So there they go. But they said they would give their life if need be. Wasn't no way they were going to do that. You and I have said a lot of things in life that we wasn't really able to back up, even though we may have felt that way at the present time. But when that time comes, wow. I mean, there's so many stories in the Old Testament when you think about it. Like Abraham willing to sacrifice his son, and he proved that he was going to do it. Now, that was something else. Of course, that's another story. And they that had laid hold on Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him afar off unto the high priest's palace, and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. I got to see all of this. But he was kind of hiding in the crowd. Now the chief priest and the elders and all the council sought false witnesses against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. At the last came 2 false witnesses and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. Now you know what they're saying, what they're trying to get them to believe is he's going to destroy the temple instead of him talking about his body. They didn't even want to think that. They wanted something to find him guilty of. And the high priest arose and said unto him, answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? But Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God that thou tell us whether thou be Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said unto him, thou hast said. Nevertheless, I say unto you, hereafter shall you see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. It's going to happen no matter what you do. He's coming back. I'll be back. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye You have heard his blasphemy. No, they're saying he's blaspheming. What think you? They answered and said, he is guilty of death. The bad people just don't want the good people around. They can't have fun when the good people are around. Have you ever walked up in a crowd of people where most of them were lost, doing their own thing? I mean, it's almost like you pulled a gun on everybody. It just everything kind of settles down, and they don't really know what to do. So what? Thank you. They answered and said, he is guilty of death. Then did they spit in his face. Now many things happened to Jesus. This is some of it, but you'll find even more in the Old Testament. And I know I've taught on this before and preached it a few times, saying, prophesy unto us, thou Christ, who is he that smote thee? Well, I believe he knew he did it, and they'll stand before him one of these days, and I believe he'll point them out then. You don't have to do it now. Now Peter sat without in the palace, and the damsel came unto him, saying, thou also was with Jesus of Galilee. But here he goes lying now. He denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. And it's amazing, when it really comes down to you and yourself, your body, and what you are really capable of doing. And when I think of this, I'm not only thinking about unto death, maybe. It doesn't mean he was going to die, but he sure didn't want to be caught in the crowd that was going to hang on the cross, that's for sure. But other things in life, we say that we want to serve the Lord when we come to church. I guess about everybody's like that. That's why they're coming to church. They got that desire to serve the Lord. And I could tell you a lot of stories about myself back in my younger years before I learned to preach. You need to be in the house of God, and but while you're there, you're looking for something to not be there, whatever it might be. And so you find an excuse. Everybody's wrong but me. And so many people are that way, and that's why they can't really be happy in a local church. They can't accept people the way they are, whether it's the constituents of the church or the pastor himself. But in verse 71, and when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him and said unto them that were there, this fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. And again, he denied with an oath, but he swore, I do not know the man. Another big lie. And after a while came unto him they that stood by and said to Peter, surely thou also art one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee, or betrays thee. Then began he to curse and swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. So then he knows. And Peter remembered the word of Jesus, which said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice, 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. At least he finally repented, as far as I can understand that. It finally dawned on him what he was doing. And when we study the Word of God, there's a lot of things in there that, like Matt said, we don't understand at that time, but somewhere later on, it dawns on us that God was talking to me. And that's good. Like Peter here, it dawned on him that the Lord told him exactly what he was going to do, and he said, not me. So we never know what we're going to do. We think sometimes that we know, what we're going to do, and we plan on doing what's right and serving the Lord and so forth. So there's a lot of things I believe that we need to make a list of in our life, and praying and asking, and He wants this, asking God to help us with anything in our life. Anything that I'm not doing right, help me to do it right. The things that I'm doing wrong, help me not to do it. The things that's coming up in life, help me to overcome them, whatever they might be. Help me to deal with them, because they're going to be coming up in our life, and it's recorded in the Bible that we're going to have these troubles in life, and we are to depend on Him more than we do. Probably none of us can depend on God as much as we ought to depend on God. If that was so, then we wouldn't need the Bible. And the Lord knows that. And that's why He mentions so many scriptures in the Bible, is like, come unto me, all you that labor and heavy laden. He promises, I will give you rest. But you got to yoke up with Him, as He said, take my yoke upon you, learn of me. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. And so the only way that we can learn is to yoke up with Him. So when we're studying the Word of God like this, or at home, or wherever it is, hearing the preacher preach, then we're working with the Lord. We're yoking up with Him, and we need to stay yoked up with Him, and things will go along a lot better. If you have a pencil, you might want to write these scriptures down on the bottom of your Bible there, or in the back or something. And I've given these before and taught on them, and the trials of Jesus, they just shows a little bit of it here. So I'll give you scriptures that we'll be probably touching on if we go ahead and Mark and Luke, and especially John. But there were 6 trials of Jesus. 3 of them were Jewish religious trials. So religious trials, 3 religious trials, and then 3 civil trials. And the first one is in John chapter 18, verse 12 through 13. You probably read more when you start reading that. And then let's see, the second one is verse 57. Now it sounds like they led him right to Him, but he went to Annas first, then, which were kinfolks, of course, and then came to Caiaphas, there in 57. That's number 2. That's the second religious trial. And then the third was in, I read my little note here. That's Luke 22:66. Luke 22:66. That's the third one. So that's the religious trials, and the civil trials was fourth trial, John 18 and 28 through whatever you want to read. John 18:28. I might read those sometime, and I know I've taught them, preached about them in the past, but those things slip our mind. But I think it's important to be able to see this, so maybe you're talking to your kids or somebody, it might help you out, help them out anyway, and kind of getting the layout of what's going on. I've always liked to try to take what's happening and lay it out like it happened, because I've mentioned so many times, the Bible's not written in chronological order. So did you get the fifth one, 23, Luke 23:6? That's number 5. And then John, the 6th one, John 18 and 38. I think that was the Sanhedrin there. Anyway, one of them was in their civil trials. Sanhedrin was the highest court there is or was. John 18:38. So you got three civil trials, three religious trials and three civil trials that they took Jesus through all of that. And in all of that, he was being mocked, spit on, beaten, and so on. So that kind of wraps up 26, and my throat's about to give out anyway. So we'll do 27, Lord willing, next week. And it's pretty long too. If we don't get through it in the time we have, then we'll pick it up later. But we've been doing pretty good at going through them, especially these last ones, because everybody pretty much knows these last few chapters here. You could almost tell the story, probably do by heart, of what's going on. All right, anything else?